Just when it felt as though the ship would never reach Gongalong Island and that they would be sailing to the end of all Sundays, the shout went up, "Land ahoy!" "We are nearly home! We are nearly home!" sang the Gongalongs. The ship dropped anchor on the north side of the island in a cove of pink seashells, well out of sight of Princess Olaf, who lived on the south, sunny side of the Mountain of Perpetual Mist. Mum wondered if it would be helpful if she went and spoke to the local mermaids to find out what was going on. Mr. Tiger agreed. All day they waited for Mum to return, while the acrobats looked longingly at the shore. Even though they were very happy being with Mr. Tiger, they couldn't help wishing they were home. Mr. Tiger put his telescope to his eye and looked up at the Mountain of Perpetual Mist. He gave a low growl. Betsy asked him if he saw anything, but tigers are mysterious animals. Even if he had seen something, which Betsy suspected he had, it was not necessarily in a tiger's nature to say so. At tea time, Mum returned. There was great excitement. "What is the news?" asked the acrobats. What Mum had to tell them was alarming. They could not sail to the south side of the island as it was not safe. Princess Olaf was sitting at the mouth of the cave, tossing rocks into the sea. And that was not the worst of it. The fence had been built to give her the biggest part of the island, where she lived alone. "What about our houses?" asked the acrobats. "What about our farms? What about our town?" Mum shook her head and said, "I'm afraid Princess Olaf has big feet. She has left footprints of destruction everywhere." "Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear," sobbed the acrobats. "Oh dear," croaked the toad. It was enough to put you off your tea, and all the whiz, pop and sparkles seemed to have gone from the Gongalongs. They were very down in their cups and saucers. Mr. Tiger brought out a map. "The fence doesn't stop us from climbing up the mountain," he said. "No," said the acrobats. "Then I think tomorrow we should pay a visit to Ivan the Timid." The acrobats said, "He may call himself timid, but he is big enough to scare us. Remember the size of that postcard? It would be terrible if he came down the mountain." "Can I go with you?" asked Betsy. Mr. Tiger said that it was up to Alfonso and Myrtle to say whether their daughter could go or not. "Oh dear," said Dad, who was always careful about everything he did. He didn't like the idea of his daughter going up a mountain. What if Ivan was a bad-tempered giant? What if he wasn't as timid as everybody thought he was? More to the point, how would Betsy get up the mountain? After all, it was very tall, and you couldn't even see how far up it went because of the mist. But Mum, who knew so little about mountains, thought it would be a good idea for Betsy to know more about them. "I think she should go," she said as she polished her tail. Mr. Tiger said he would take Betsy up on his back. "On your back?" repeated Dad. "Is that safe? Surely Betsy should have a crash helmet. Oh dear, dear, this is very worrying indeed." But once Mr. Tiger had demonstrated the safety features of his top hat, which was far more protective than any normal crash helmet, on or off the map of the world, Mum and Dad agreed to Betsy's mountain climbing adventure. Chapter 11. The sun had climbed out of bed, hot and bothered, when Mr. Tiger and Betsy set off the following morning. Betsy was wearing Mr. Tiger's top hat, and they were both eating kipper paste sandwiches as they rowed towards the pink seashell cove. A party of glum-looking gongalongs greeted them, They were pleased to see Mr. Tiger, but did wonder if Betsy might be a giantess. Mr. Tiger felt a speech was needed to cheer them up. He explained that, first, he was there to save the Gongalong people and to rid their island of Princess Olaf. Second, neither he nor Betsy were giants. And third, they wanted to climb the mountain and meet Ivan the Timid. His speech didn't have quite the effect he thought it would. Best not to disturb him, the Gongalongs said, shaking their heads. Look at the damage Princess Olaf has done, and she has smaller shoes by far than Ivan the Timid. Mr. Tiger was not the kind of cat to put off so easily. With Betsy on his back, he set off up the mountain, making light work of the steep cliffs. In no time they had reached the mist. Here they found a battered sign which read, Home of Ivan the Timid, 53 Rockface, Mountain of Perpetual Mist. Please do not disturb unless it is an emergency. It was very, very cold up there, and Betsy was pleased that Mr. Tiger had brought a warm coat for her to wear. As the mist swirled, it became harder to follow the path. All they could hear was heavy breathing, which seemed to make the mist thicker, until it was nearly impossible to see where they were going. Every now and again, they heard an odd sniffing sound or a sigh. Betsy wondered if it was the wind. Mr. Tiger said he doubted that. Suddenly, he saw a huge pair of shoes with a hole and a toe poking out. They looked up, and finally, appearing out of the mist, was the face of a somewhat woolly giant. Mr. Tiger still had a packet of kipper paste sandwiches, and he offered them to Ivan, who timidly took one. My dear old top, said Mr. Tiger, what are you doing up here all alone? I'm here to make sure, said Ivan the Timid, that no giant ever walks or tramples over any of the little Gongalongs. Oh dear, said Betsy, haven't you heard about Princess Olaf? Ivan hadn't and was most upset when they told him. This is terrible news, he said. This is an emergency. I should have known, but the mist has become so thick these days that it's hard to see anything except a glimpse of the magnificent moon. I did send a postcard to the Gongalongs. I waited for a reply, but none came. Have you brought one? Betsy shook her head. I am afraid not. It's as I feared, said Ivan the Timid. They are terrified of me. A misunderstanding, old top, said Mr. Tiger kindly. I've been awfully lonely up here with no one to talk to and not even a hot water bottle to keep me warm on winter nights. Sometimes I sing to the moon, but it doesn't notice me. Why should it? Ivan took another sandwich. He said kippers were his favourite, especially freshly caught kippers.